Well, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are on our wonderful planet. And welcome to the Journey to CFO. This is the first in the 2026 series, and we're absolutely delighted that you're here with us. Actually, we've had around 2,000 people registered for the live stream today. So a huge thank you for everyone who's taken their time to register. We've had a large number of people also send in some questions and some thoughts already. So a huge thank you for those of you who are interacting with us. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm the host of this series. And actually, our organization is called the World Class Manager Organization. For those of you who may be already connected with us, you'll understand exactly what we do. For those of you who not, we spend much of our time working around the world with various companies and also governments, helping to build management capability at scale. One of the key things that we've seen, of course, is how to become successful in respect of what is it that leaders, great CEOs, great CFOs actually do in order to create exceptional careers and, of course, drive great business impact. So this series is about trying to find out from people who have managed to go through that journey from the beginning to the sort of peak of their career, or maybe not the peak, maybe they're going to get further, to an important point in their career, and we're going to figure out what we can learn from them as part of this series. We're also hosting this in association with ACCA, so I'm going to share some links in a moment, but we're very excited to run this series of programs throughout 2026, and we've got some more exciting guests as the year will unfold. But let's focus on today, and we are very excited to have with us a very special guest, very, very special guest, a lady called Alison Brogan, who is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of Bidcorp in the UK. I've had an interaction, a relationship with and worked with Bidcorp over the years, many years actually, probably about 15 years, probably in total. An exceptional company of all of the organizations we come across around the world. I hold Bidvest or Bidcorp in high regard actually as an organization, in such high regard actually that they're one of the 4 case studies that we cover off in our book, which we launched a couple of years ago. And of all of the companies we came across around the world, it was great to, bring to life some of the great stuff that they're doing, and won a ton of awards for how they've created an exceptional culture, delivered great experiences for their customers and their guests as well, as also in terms of a very profitable and sustainably growing company out there, which is doing great things. So I don't want to talk too much about the company because I'm sure Alison's going to do a better job of articulating what they're up to. But also Alison's career journey. Again, I don't want to share too much, but she's had a fantastic career journey from where she began to what she's currently doing for the company as well. So we're going to cover off some of that. And also, we're going to get into some really valuable questions for you as we go through this. This is a live broadcast, totally live. Welcome from a very grey and rainy, you can't see much out the window here, but welcome from a grey and rainy London. The weather is not yet picking up, but I'm sure that many of you are in more exotic, warmer, nicer places than grey, rainy London. So wherever you are, please give a shout out. You can use the chat function, drop in the chat, let us know where you are, shout out your city, shout out your country, shout out your town, or the organization that you're working with. Please feel free to just drop that into the comments and let's get a good read of where we are. So we've got Ruth here from Malaysia. Awesome. Many people from Malaysia. We've got Grace here also suffering with this bad weather in London. So a huge thank you to everyone who's joined in for the session today. Now you know how to use the chat function. Please do take a moment to drop in any questions or thoughts as we go through. We like to make this as valuable for you as possible. And that valuable for you means whatever's on your mind, what you think would be valuable for you to understand a bit more of, please feel free to drop that into the chat. We're on multi-platforms, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on somewhere else as well, I'm sure, on Facebook, I think, and also on direct web link that you got to this program through. So however you got here, I'm sure you've got access to some sort of chat function. We've got some of our team also from the World Class Managers team that are live on the line with us. So hello, I'm not going to bring them in, maybe later for Ash and Rose, who we've also got from our team. And also, we've got our very, very, very special guest. So I'm going to bring Alison to the stage. Hi, good morning, Alison. Well, good afternoon, should I say, depending on where we're in London. How are you doing, Alison?
Hi, Wayne. I'm really good. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's very wet and very windy in the northwest of England. So that 37 degrees in Durban was not helpful. Not helpful.
No, that's not
great
helpful.
To have people with us.
What an awesome group of countries we've got represented in the stream today. So a huge thank you to everyone who's joined in. And Alison, so maybe I could ask you, we'll get straight into it. In terms of where you're at right now, what's happening for you in your world?
Yeah, maybe I'll just start with a little bit about Bidcorp UK, because I'm not sure everyone will have heard of us. We're not a consumer-facing brand, as you know, Wayne. So Bidcorp UK is the UK arm of Bidcorp. which is a South African headquartered business, and we distribute food, drink, catering supplies to a whole range of customers. And we operate in kind of 4 main divisions in the UK. So we have Bidfood, which is our kind of broadline wholesale. We deliver thousands of products to tens of thousands of customers in hospitality, schools, hotels, pubs, care homes, etc. And people will have definitely, hopefully, seen our trucks, or if they haven't before, will do after this. We have Bidfresh, which is really what it says. It's a supplier of fresh ingredients, seafood, produce, meat, etc. We have a small manufacturing division which produces ready meals, value-adding ready meals, and ice cream. And then we have a very unique set of 7 independent businesses that operate under Cater Food Buying Group. And I have the pleasure of being the CFO in the UK, looking after that kind of vast range of businesses. My role is incredibly varied from hour to hour, day to day. This last couple of weeks has been quite heavy on group reporting because it's our half year in December. But equally, I'll get involved in large scale projects, infrastructure projects, investments, catch up with the teams, data reviews. So yeah, no one day is the same, Wayne.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I guess my experience with the business going back was a real gift, because I got to go and spend some time delivering to customers as well, which actually was much more strenuous than I ever imagined. I mean, I was quite exhausted. It's quite a tiring day, but it was great to get that customer interaction and see firsthand the difference that the business makes for so many people. And so certainly for many people around the world, you've definitely interacted with Bidcorp in some way, probably if you've eaten in a restaurant or in a hotel, or you've got kids in school and so on. So you play such a massive role.
Friends and family love sending me pictures of trucks from either in the UK, or my brother's currently in New Zealand, so I've had quite a few of our New Zealand trucks sent across on photographs. So it's great to receive, and I think all they're passionate about the brand and the look of the vans, etc. So when people do send pictures, I do still get excited even after 25 years with the business, Wayne. So yeah,
that says a lot. Says a lot.
All very passionate.
So after this is a great segue point there. After 25 years, when you think of the journey that you've been through from the beginning of your career, and I think this is apt for many, because for those of you who are on the ACCA qualification track, you may be qualified, you may be aiming to become qualified one day. I think this is a powerful story, because you began with your qualification and then your career has obviously taken off. And maybe you could take us through a bit of a sort of beginning to end of your career journey for those of you who don't know you.
Yeah, no, happy to. I mean, I certainly didn't set out to be an accountant. At school, I was very sporty. I wanted to be an Olympic gymnast. That didn't quite work out for me. I kind of stopped at the age of 12. My career of gymnastics finished at 12. I was quite badly injured. So, and I really didn't know where I wanted to go. Didn't really take to school. School wasn't really for me. Had no intention of staying on at sixth form or college. So with the support of my parents, left just before my 16th birthday with no real clue of what I intended to do. Had this idea of getting a job in a bank just because I think my dad had done it at some point in his career and it seemed like a good idea. And then the job advert in the newspaper, which I know you'll remember, Wayne, you'd look in the paper for your job adverts, and there was a YTS, which was a youth training scheme. It was kind of the apprenticeship back in the day. And you basically worked 4 days a week and went to college for that 5th day. Probably similar to how it works now, to be fair. So I took on this role in a local accountancy firm and did my BTEC in business and finance 1 day a week for 2 years. And I was on £27.50 a week. I thought I'd won the lottery, and it was really the start of it. I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I started my ACCA qualifications when I was 18. And that's when I started to realise I was quite good at this. I thought I could really see this becoming a future. I took to the exams quite well. I was fully qualified by the age of 22, which obviously is roughly when most people leave university, and I was already a qualified accountant. I was thinking earlier when I was just making some notes, I think I failed 1 exam along the way, which I just wanted to share. And I knew I'd failed. I failed spectacularly. It wasn't close. And in those days, you could mark your paper as do not mark, and then it doesn't count as a fail. So I think I spent most of the exam deciding whether to mark this paper do not mark or whether to let them mark it. And I made the mistake of letting them mark it. So I retook the exam, and I really struggled with this subject. So I went to college for a period of time and tried to really get to grips with it, because I home studied. So you got sent your books in the post, and that's how you did your studying. And eventually, by the time I came to take exam, ACCA changed the structure, and I actually was exempt from this exam, so I didn't need to take it.
Oh.
But I still took it just to prove to myself that I could pass this exam. And I honestly can't remember my mark, but I did pass my exam, and I passed it fairly easily. But I really didn't need to do that. So that was probably says a lot about me as a person. I think after 4 years at a local accountancy firm, I decided that audit wasn't really my path. I really saw myself in an MD type role. So I decided to move into industry. And within about a 7-year period, I had 3 or 4 different roles. So I did move around companies quite a bit during that time. I was really ambitious. I probably had one boss in that period, which I don't know whether I didn't like them or they didn't like me, but it wasn't a great match. I think I felt they took pleasure in like making sure I knew my place and making my life difficult. And, you know, in terms of learnings, I think, unfortunately, you do learn as much from a bad boss as you do from a good boss. And I certainly took some learnings of how I didn't want to be if I, got into a leadership role, and how I wanted to be supportive and approachable and very much not like this person. I think when I first took on my leadership role, not in this business, in a different one, I wasn't given any training, any support. I probably wasn't even a good manager, never mind a leader. And, I definitely can look back and think mistakes were made. I should have done things differently. I remember one particular team, they just didn't gel. And I think some elements weren't getting on with other elements of the team. And probably look back on it now, there probably was a little bit of bullying in the team, not from me, but from the individuals in the team.
Right.
And I just didn't see that. I was very much focused on, well, we need to do these tasks and we're going to do these tasks. And I didn't really see the people and the importance of developing people and making sure the team gelled, because I just didn't have that experience. So thank goodness today there's a lot of training available and support for people going into those managers roles, because if you're thrown in your 20s to that kind of role, you just have to find out and you make mistakes along the way. So that was definitely a big learning for me.
And I think on that point, Alison, I think there's a lot more care and attention, well, hopefully paid by organizations into the impact of a great or a bad manager. I mean, this is obviously where most of my time is spent, but, we've certainly seen organizations evolve to be much more sophisticated because they've understood that the impact that a bad manager can have on performance, on everything, customer feedback is immeasurable. So,
Yeah.
I think they're making better organizations tend to seem to make better choices now.
Definitely. There's a lot more investment in that area. As you say, people can see the value of it rather than seeing it as an overhead. So yeah, I joined Bidfood back in 2000. So yeah, this is my 26 years. Obviously, it's a significant part of my career. My first role was a commercial accountant supporting depots, which I loved. I was looking after the southeast region of the old 3663 frozen division. We were in different divisions at that point. So I travelled down around the depots probably a week, a month. I got to know the business. I got to know so many amazing people. It really was a great way to join the business and learn about what the business is about and the culture. And then I think, my career was really taking off. I quickly kind of made it through to director of level. I had a couple of the MDs in the business at that time who could see probably the raw talent. I might have needed a bit more refinement. I might have been a bit too direct and not quite asked the questions at the right time. But they could see, that I had the capability, and with that support and training that, I could be a good leader within the business. So that breakthrough to director of role, which I think was around 2004. So I've been with the business about 4 years, was a massive step for me. And then soon after that, I had my son, just to make things even more of a challenge. And I look back now, and I think I took 11 weeks off when I had my son. That was my maternity leave, 11 weeks.
Wow.
And I'm trying to think, wow, why did I do that? Why did I want to? And I think that was about me. It wasn't pressure from the business or anything like that. I wanted to come back. It was right for the family at that time. But I still massively prioritised my son and my husband and my family, and I still do to this day, even though he's 19 now. But yeah, it's still, I think it's a big step, and to come back that quickly, it's probably something to look back and think, I'm not really sure why I did that, but it obviously was important to me at the time. But I think it's so important to support people who have, dealing with childcare, dealing with care, whether it be with parents or anyone else. And that's, to me, something I try and do with all my team and all the people within the business, is provide that support, because you just get it back tenfold. If you can support people and give them a little bit of flexibility, it really does help. So that's a Bidfood is a great culture fit for me. Opinions are encouraged, the structures aren't overly formal, you can communicate, people are amazing, and I think that's why a lot of people do stay for such a long time. Lots of different role models. When I first joined the board, from colleagues on the board, around whether that be managing conflict or how to be a statutory director. I think I was fortunate to have lots of role models around me that I could learn from. And more recently, I've got a fantastic team. Of course, I would say that, but I really have. I've got Andrew as CEO, who's a fantastic support, really values your input. Obviously, you've met Andrew many times, but equally just lets you get on with the job, which it's good to be trusted to do as well. So yeah, that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour.
And I think a lot of the comments, again, a huge thank you to everyone who submitted some of their, I guess, thoughts and ideas of what they wanted to get out of the session today. And I think there were quite a lot of comments about the transition to becoming a leader, to becoming more senior in the organization. I think for those of us who maybe are at the more early stages of our career, it's like the analogy I often think of is like sort of standing at the bottom of a mountain. You're looking up, you're thinking, I just don't know how this. I can see the top, I can see it, but getting there looks quite arduous, and I don't even know how you'd go about that. And I think what we realized in our experience, and we've probably now worked with more than 1,000 different CFOs of organizations we've come across, there isn't a CFO I don't think I've met with who at the beginning of their career were very clear that they were going to get to that point. It tends to be a series of fortunate events that happen. They work really hard, they get recognized, they get offered opportunities, and their careers are much more zigzag than they ever look straight or hockey stick, for sure. So I'm just interested in terms of your journey to CFO. Was this something that was explicit for you in your mind at the beginning? Like you said, you wanted to switch to that MD track, or is it something that's unfolded a lot more organically in terms of your career?
No, it definitely unfolded organically. I did want to be successful. I wanted to have a good career. I wanted to work for a business that I enjoyed working for. But no, I didn't really expect it. When the CFO opportunity came up, I grabbed it with both hands, but it wasn't the path that I expected to take. The commercial side of the business has always been my passion, to take on that kind of wider role. And certainly the FD role to start with, which was more, definitely more technical than I'd been involved in. That was a big shift for me. But, I learned as much as I can. I listened to others who had more expertise, and you grow into that role. So, no, it definitely wasn't. And probably if you ask me today what I want to do, I still probably wouldn't say CFO. I'd probably still think I could be something completely different. But, I do really love my job. And I just think you need to take your chances, and you need people to take a chance on you at some point as well. And you'll never feel ready, you'll never quite be ready, but hopefully people will get those opportunities.
Yeah. And can I ask you about one of the points you touched on earlier? I'd love to get into some of the stuff with you around customers, because obviously that's a huge component of everything. One of the things you touched upon earlier was in, I don't know what organization it was, and you probably don't want to say, but you sort of had this encounter with a tricky character. I think there is always in every scene, right, in every act, in every play, and we've worked with thousands of different companies. There's guaranteed, and this is what I say to my children, there's guaranteed to be a tricky character. It's just the law of averages. There's always going to be one.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, now when you sort of post-rationalize and look back, is there anything that you think, because, for those of us who are yet to meet a tricky character, what is there that we should keep in mind? Because you're guaranteed you're going to meet one.
Yeah, I mean, I think you will. As you say, I think with a lot of training and, there's a lot more focus on this. So probably I'd like to think it happens less than perhaps it did historically. I guess it's like bullying in school. You like to think it happens less than perhaps it did in the 70s and 80s, but we know it's still there. I think just try and work out as well, have a look at yourself and reflect on yourself and your behaviours and whether anything that you're doing is potentially provoking or creating the response that you're getting from this person. I think, as I said when I explained it, was it me creating the situation by being very ambitious? Did they see that as a threat, and was I creating that behaviour? And the answer is probably 50-50. It probably was within this person's character as well. And if you feel as though you can, I think, you can't just stay and suffer someone. I'm not saying everyone should just leave the minute they come across a bad boss, but you've got to try and work through it. You've got to ultimately try and work with that person, sit down, speak to them, explain how you're feeling, which I probably didn't at the time. I probably didn't have the confidence to do that. And I think if you have that open and honest conversation and the situation doesn't move forward, then you've got to make your own choice about your direction.
Yeah, great point. Because again, life is too short, right? So if it's not looking like this is going to work, get out. I think is probably one of the important points as well. So if we could get into the customer angle, as I said at the beginning, when I started work with you guys many years ago, I got to go out and experience a few different shifts, but I went out delivering I think it was some of the subway deliveries, which was a real eye-opener on many levels. And what I got to see in that, if I just tell you a quick story of that moment, because I don't know if I ever shared this with you, I was out, I won't say his name, but I was out with a driver who was really exceptional. And what happened is we arrived at the customer, and there was something that obviously that they had ordered, but it wasn't available. And what I saw in that moment was wonderful, because I was standing there, and essentially I'm like driver's mate with a high vis on. And the driver said to the franchise owner, we don't have this, and he explained it in a really great way, and she was absolutely fine with it. And then we were on, as we were walking towards her to make that, to have that conversation, I was nervous because I was thinking, this is like a warm summer's day in a very touristy place. Surely she's not going to be very happy. But it was the way that he dealt with it was so exceptional, and there was nothing that he could have done. No one's messed up. It's just as it is. But it was the ownership at the front end of the company, where you saw someone, and the easiest option for him in that moment could have been to blame something that have happened maybe in the warehouse or some other part of the supply chain. But he took ownership, dealt with it, exceptional customer service delivery. She walked away absolutely happy, and we were on to the next job. And I just thought, wow, that is, in that brief, I wish I'd have had that on camera. It was such a great thing. And I got to see more and more across the business, which is why I guess Bidcorp and you win so many awards for customer excellence and service delivery, because it just works so well. So again, I'd love to learn a bit more about the ethos, focus on customer. Obviously, it's everything that you do, and again, what you maybe have observed and learned from your position as CFO over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's still very much, as you say, at the heart of what we do. I think from my role within finance, just to start with, I just wanted to talk about our internal customers, because we have a saying, an expression, that if you're not serving a customer, make sure you're serving someone who is serving a customer. So regardless of your role in the business, you've always got that end customer in mind. And I think for me within finance, some of my team, are they customer facing, but there's a large proportion who aren't. And I think, it's important that they're seen and they're working with and supporting the business, and not just seeing that the crunching numbers in an ivory tower. We don't have an ivory tower, by the way. We have a nice office, but it's not an ivory tower. So for me, that finance being seen as being out there supporting the business, understanding the business, and then the business is able to do its role in supporting our actual external customers is so important. And I think it's that visibility. So whether it's in my finance or whether it's part of the leadership, to me, being visible in the business, as understanding the challenges the businesses are facing and the opportunities. We have a very decentralized approach. I know you went to a number of sites. So, yes, of course, there's common themes, but they're all unique. They have their local leadership team, and that's really important as a centralized department to remember. And this is what I get so much joy in the role of visiting the sites, the new acquisitions, meeting different people. I was down at our new Worcester site a couple of weeks ago, and I just met a couple of people, one who let me in, one who just kind of popped his head in, just to find out, how they're finding it. It's been open a number of months. What are their challenges? What can I do to remove any blockages and make their lives easier? So, to me, that's a big part of what we do. It brings the numbers to life. It helps us understand the numbers. It helps the decision making. If I get a request for a capital investment, I can visualize it. I can kind of say, okay, I understand what that's trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. So that, I just wanted to focus a little bit on internal customers. And if you're in finance, if you're in audit, is a good example. If you show an real interest in the business you're auditing and don't just ask the questions you've been at, that is so much appreciated when you're on the receiving end of that people are interested in the business and they want to understand beyond the control question or whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. So, and we talk about food a lot, so it's definitely a really interesting business.
Well, that's the thing. I think whether you're in finance, whether you're in HR, whether you're in technology, any role where you're essentially serving somebody who serves the end customer or end beneficiary of the organization, if in a lot of our world is spent with the HR business partner world, and you look at their key stakeholders as the same in finance. Any stakeholder in the organization where you feel that the business partner, whether that's finance or HR or technology, is genuinely interested and wants to make your life easier, better, faster, you never let them go, right? Because they're ultra valuable. And that's the key. If you want to be seen as being ultra valuable in a supporting role or a corporate function, demonstrating that value through that listening and seeking to add value is the key.
Yeah, and we do the same with our a few external advisors, whether that be insurance or tax or whatever it might be. And we really want them to feel like an extension of our team, not just some external company that we go to. And, I like to think we do that well. It's really important to us. And quite often, we'll be told, well, you're one of our favourite clients. And I'm hoping that's not just a sales pitch. I hope people genuinely buy into what we're trying to achieve. And I think valuing the internal relationships helps the people who are frontline, whether that be within finance or drivers, etc., to be able to do their jobs and provide that service excellence.
And then from the leadership and management side of things, because I guess, again, you're playing a few different, well, actually, when you described it at the beginning, for those of you who may have joined a bit late, Alison described this portfolio of responsibility that you have across the organization. And I think there are so many things where you'll have an insight into looking at great leadership and management across the business. So I'm interested in your view of seeing that, because you're playing a number of different roles. One is you're playing the CFO role, and then also in your own team. I think it's a microphone. I think your mic on your headphones is rubbing on something that's coming through. There you go. Yeah.
Is that stuff?
I think, yeah, perfect. Yeah. Also with your own team, because you're playing this leadership and management role. So whilst leading a team, you're also looking at the impacts of leadership development across the business as well. I'm interested in your thoughts on, again, what you've picked up over the years about how to lead, teams in the most effective way.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think I was looking back, so I was met with our graduates recently, and they asked me this really good question, and I answered it on the spot, and I've had time to think of it since, and I haven't changed my answer. They said, what would you go back and tell your 16-year-old self, and what would you do differently? And I think for me, just enjoy the journey. It is a journey. It will zigzag, as you mentioned earlier. Have your career plan, have your career path, but it won't work out like that. And, put yourself outside of your comfort zone along that journey. If you'd asked me to do this 5 years ago, you'd have got a very short and flat no. But me going on LinkedIn or doing something like this isn't what I do every day. You know, I'm not that kind of individual. But for me, it helps me grow, helps my personal growth if I'm constantly challenging myself to do something different. So I think the other bit as well is I probably spent thinking, you go on these courses, what can I learn from them? It's leadership team courses are so important, or learning how to be a leader or tips or whatever it is, but you're only going to take 1 or 2 things that work for you, because if you take everything, you sound like a textbook. So you've got to take the 1 or 2 things that work for you, and then you've got to develop your own style, personal brand, call it what you will, and you've got to be able to apply it. So don't think I want to be like this person, I want to present like this person. You've got to, you know, find your way of doing it from what you've learned, either from other people or from going on the courses, and then fix your style depending on the audience. So if I'm with members of the leadership team, I'm most likely the most risk-averse person in the room, and you know, it's important, and you have to be able to do that without dampening spirits, but you have to, you know, have that balance. If I'm with other teams and they're risk averse, I might need to be more the risk taker and encouraging those different behaviours and challenging differently. So I think you have to say, find your personal brand, find what works for you as a leader, but you have to be able to adapt that to the audience. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, you know, I've got many different types of individuals who work for me, and I don't say, right, this is how we're going to do a one-to-one, or this is how we're going to do a team meeting. It's very much for them to come to me, for me to listen, and then kind of flex around how they want to work and adapt accordingly.
Yeah. I'm interested in terms of, not necessarily with the team, because obviously you don't want to expose members of your team here, but I'm just more general of your observations over your career so far. When it comes to the ambitions of people, I mean, one of the things that we've observed quite a lot is that very few people tend to be very clear about what it is that they want. And as you said, you know, maybe there's something else for you next that you might want to do totally different. I think the importance of what we would call the goal setting conversation or the appraisal conversation, and the skill of the manager. Well, there's 2 sides to it, isn't there? One is the skill of the manager in having that conversation. The other one is the preparedness of the individual who's actually given some pre-thought to where I might want to be in the next 6 to 12 months. I'm interested in that because I think that's such a crucial part of the career development journey that can really propel you rapidly in an organization or can hold you back. And I'm interested in your insights into that. So being on the receiving end of those one-to-ones, what's that felt like, and what have you observed about how best to have some of those one-to-ones?
I think for me, you know, you have to do more listening than talking, but I think people have got to feel encouraged and feel as though, you know, for me, someone who wants to develop and wants to be a future leader and ready to that future leader role, whether that's on the leadership team or wherever it is, they've got to be confident enough to recruit the right people around them, so they've got capacity and the headspace for their growth. And, you know, I always encourage my team to be pushing up and wanting to take more on, because the more they take on, the more I can take on, and, you know, it has a positive effect on the business. So for me, I think it's making sure, you know, don't feel as though you have to fill every hour of every day. To become a good leader, you need to be confident enough to have the right people around you. You know, sometimes you recruit people that, you know, ultimately may finish up being better than you, and that's good, that's positive. You want those people around you. And then that gives you the growth and the space to grow, to be able to take more on. And, you know, do be open with people. When people are open with me about what their ambitions are, hopefully I can then help them navigate. You know, it's not as simple as, well, I want to do that role over there. It's like, well, how can we shape your role so you can continue to develop, continue to take more on, and put you on a path to where you want to go. And not everyone will, you know, unfortunately, some people will leave, and if they leave and take on a bigger role, and, you know, to me that's still a success. Just, I might not be able to, you can't fulfill everyone's ambitions, But what you can do is try and give them the opportunity, whether that's the exposure to the leadership team, whether it's leading a project. And I think probably in the last 5 or 10 years, I'm probably a lot more confident doing that. Whereas I think before, one-to-one and people management was more about tasks. Now it is about the people and the development. As you say, that's the key part of my role.
And how important is building your network been in all of this? Because I'm sure, you know, as we've had in previous sessions where we've interviewed different leaders of companies, we've had comments where people say, you know, I find like I'm so proficient in my job. I'm like as good as I could possibly be, but I'm still not getting the opportunity. And one of the things we've run into quite a lot is, well, you know, how well networked are you? And I think that, you know, building the network internally can be such a powerful thing to do. Scary sometimes, but I just wonder, in terms of your journey, how important has been your network?
Yeah, it's really important, and that was the good. I think these with Bid Food, particularly, which is the area that I joined. We are very much people business. You have to know where to go and who to go to, etc. And I think being out in the depots from the start and then working with national accounts, you end up with quite a wide network. So for me, it's critical, and I do encourage everyone within the business to network. You go to the leadership team events. What you don't want to see is finance in one corner and HR in the other and depots in another corner. You want to see everyone interacting and using that opportunity. Yeah. So yeah, I think for me, you know, as I say, one of the reasons I like to go out to the business is so I can meet people. So if I have got a question, I know if I ring such and such a body in Worcester, they'll be able to help me with that answer. So whatever your role is, I think building that network, particularly internally at Bid Food and Bidcorp UK, is critical.
Yeah, yeah.
And also externally, you know, I'm reasonably new to LinkedIn in some respects, in terms of being someone who's active on there, and I'm not that active, but I try. But I think it's important to you're building the network as well. You know, there's 150 people in the finance team across the Northwest, but most people haven't heard of us. And to me, that's about getting our brand and what we're trying to achieve as a department, as an employer, as well as a business.
Well, let's see if we can. This is unplanned, but let's do this. Let's see if we can boost your network, Alison. So here is the QR code to Alison Brogan's LinkedIn profile. So if you click on that, then you can send Alison a LinkedIn request. So hopefully we should flood you with a new network of people that you can connect with.
Thank you. I think.
Of course, this is a beautiful community, global, beautiful. So final question I'd love to ask you before we can get into some of the Q&A from those of us connected is about the sort of the strategic focus and the future. I mean, you know, no conversation is the obvious debate right now about the impact of tech and AI and so on. And of course, for you, from everything from the driver community through to the automation of how you run your company will be, I'm sure, front of mind in many conversations you have. I wonder, I don't want to necessarily focus on tech because everyone's talking about AI, but more about, in terms of the future next sort of 3 to 5 years, do you know, what significant change do you think there is? And do you think the business needs to pivot in any way, or do you just carry on as you are?
I think all businesses need to pivot. You know, I think I just want to go back a step, because when I joined the workforce, computers were just being introduced. I think we spoke about this in our brief catch up. So for me, I feel like I'm at that full cycle where when I joined the workforce, you know, everything was kind of written down. It's all very manual. We got our first computer in the corner of the office. It was all really exciting. You know, you fast forward and we're suddenly at the point where AI is being introduced, and, you know, change, you know, embrace the change. It is exciting. You know, we've been through this with computers. You know, it's not suddenly overnight going to change the world, but it will have a dramatic impact in the next 2, 3, 5 years. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. So yeah, for me, we're constantly, you know, clearly it's quite a difficult trading environment at the moment. We've got to constantly be reviewing our plans. You know, we have a 5-year plan, but it can't just sit on the shelf for that 5 years. We're reviewing it, you know, 3 months, every 6 months, you know, whatever's appropriate, looking at how trading conditions and the environment's impacting it and all those other factors. And obviously tech is a big part of that. You know, we're probably, you know, not at the level of like an Amazon or someone like that in terms of tech. You know, the wholesale market is slightly different, but there's massive opportunity. And I think if any business is standing still at the moment, then they are effectively moving backwards because it's just too much change going on.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw over the weekend, there was this unfolding story. I caught it because it was on X, and it was on this thing called Malt Book. I don't know if you saw it. There was a guy who set up a website and invited this AI agent that he's been developing to join it. And I don't know quite what happened, but the AI agent then invited, I think, other AI agents. And then the last time I looked a couple of days ago, there was 1.6 million AI agents who joined this website. Humans can only watch, it's only for AI agents to discuss. And what's fascinating was looking at the discussion topics of the AI agents. So one of them had set up an AI group called, You're Human. So everyone of the AI bots were discussing their interactions with their humans, whether they like them or not. I mean, it's fascinating to see. And people were excited over the weekend because it seemed to be, this is like this emergence of AGI we're seeing live now, of seeing, AI agents form themselves into a community and discuss. So, I mean, who knows where this goes? It was fascinating to watch. I mean, are you obviously aware of all the tech that's out there and all of the potential implications and applications for the business? Is that something that you're particularly involved in, or you leave that to others?
No, I mean, obviously there's other people, the other leadership team kind of look at it as everyone is looking at it all the time, particularly in terms of finance. I'm quite focused on it in terms of where it's taken us, in terms of the overall impact on the business. It's something that everyone has to be involved in. There's no longer something you leave to an IT director. It's fundamental to everything we do going forward. And I think just in terms of kind of the strategy and my role, I think it's easy to get distracted with the sexy new stuff. And I think, what's important for me is that I do the basics, kind of just go without saying. There's things I have to do every day. I don't have a PA, I've got to sign things off, I've got to approve things, I've got to do all of that good stuff. Yeah. And I just then want to be able to focus my efforts on where I can support the business with my understanding. And I always say, where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck? Where it's not who shouts loudest, it's, where's my support, or where's my team's efforts really going to change that? Where's the leadership team, whether that be cash, service, margin, risk, whatever that might be. Yeah. So I think, yes, there's some really exciting things happening there. But equally, day to day, we've got a business to run, and it's a balancing act. I don't like that expression, but it is.
Very much is. Right, so we're nearly at that time. I think we've got like a huge number of questions that people have submitted in. So a huge thank you to everyone who's shared a question. And if we got Ash or Rose on the line fielding some of the questions, if we can go for it. So first question here is from Laura Holman. This is live, everyone. We see this at the same time that you see this. Any advice for someone currently working at board level in an SME, but who is looking for the next step in their career? So SME will probably mean for a small to medium-sized enterprise, for those of you outside of the UK perhaps. But Alison, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, but I think it's that if you're at board level in an SME, it's obviously that $1 million question as to whether you're going to look to join a bigger organisation or take on a different role within an SME. So I think it is that's probably where I'd start with my advice, is work out, do you see yourself working for a large business? In some respects, it might be a more narrow role, depending on what your position is within the SME. And is that a step you want to make to get some different experience and exposure, or do you want to continue within an SME type business? Yeah, great point. I guess the great thing about an SME, as far as we see it across all the different companies, is you get such broad exposure to everything. Yeah. The challenge in a large corporation is you can get stovepiped and stuck, and often the grass is always greener. So next question from Daniel Okai. Thank you very much, Daniel. Finance role seems to grow faster in the developing world. What other way to boost progression from developing countries? Well, great question, Daniel. I have some thoughts on that as well. You go first then. I'll go first. Think about that one.
I mean, I think from our experience, Daniel, I mean, we work across, I don't know, maybe like 30 or more countries around the world now. So we get to see, what we would term traditionally as more developed and developing economies everywhere. I guess the exciting thing in many of the developing countries is the fact that often careers seem to be it's much more possible to switch careers and change direction, I think, more than in developing countries. And what I mean is, certainly in finance, I would say there's this sort of old adage in the UK that if you've not worked in finance, it's kind of hard, if not impossible, to get a job in finance because you don't have the finance background or experience. Whereas in other places around the world, it tends to be that you can definitely develop many more disciplines and skill sets across different careers, different sectors, and you can pivot much more easily. So I think there are benefits, of course, to developing world versus developed world, if we could like to term it that. So I think that's one huge one. And I think the other thing is also the power of building the network. So I think what we had, which is definitely a leveler now, if we rewind back, I'm going grey, I'm 50 this year, actually. If I go back to the early stage of my career, I joined Deloitte straight out of university. So I spent the first 12 years of my career in accounting firms. We didn't have access to anything like a LinkedIn. LinkedIn's so phenomenal because you can grow your network exponentially, rapidly, which you couldn't do. And I think the law of averages means that you can often access lots of different experts and professionals, you know, and not everyone's going to want to spend time with you or give you advice, but many actually do if you ask the question. So I think there can be a really great way using the tools that we've got access to now that globally the world opens up, of which we can see, of course, on the call. Alison, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'd just add there's some great businesses, you know, across the world, obviously including Bidcorp. So I think you know, if you look at roles within perhaps some of the organisations that span across the world, then that might give you some different opportunities. But I agree with you. I think LinkedIn is a good way of generating that.
Yeah. I mean, I am sure, like everyone else, you get tons of requests, but some I do respond to and actually can be really positive. Thank you, Daniel. Next question from Holly. How do you handle when you know someone's aspiration doesn't align with their skills? What a brilliant question, Holly. You know, I first noticed this when I was watching, there's a show in the UK, I'm not sure where you are, Holly, but in the UK we have a show called The X Factor, which is like the American Idol show. Most countries have an equivalent. And we have this guy, Simon Cowell, and it was a Simon Cowell moment where someone stands up to sing, and obviously everyone around them has told them that they're like awesome, but they're horrific. And he's probably the first person who points out they're horrific. Actually, we did it with one of our children. You know, I said to her, "You're no good." You know, people said, "That's awful. You're dampening down her spirits." No, but I don't want you to go on X Factor and have Simon tell you you're no good. I'll tell you right now, this is not for you. But I think this is an important question. How do you handle this difference between the aspiration and also skills?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. Hopefully not quite like Simon Cowell, but I think for me, it is, you have to be honest, you know, and it's how you deal with that honesty, and clearly it has to be measured. How can you support them? How can you develop the skills that they perhaps don't have with their aspiration? So it is turning that slightly negative conversation and an honest conversation into a positive, and how you can support them to get their skills to align. It's either that or suggest a completely different career path, but hopefully it's a slight misalignment rather than a complete write-off.
But it's also like seeing in the, actually, we'll come back to that. So there's a quick fire round. There's so many questions. So question from Wendy, what measures do you take to ensure you have work-life balance, given the huge responsibilities you have as a CFO? And this is a question I was going to ask. So thank you so much, Wendy.
I know,
yeah,
and I was
brilliant.
Going to raise it and I didn't, so I'm really glad you asked. I think this is something I've probably learned in the last 10 years is so important. I think certainly when my son was younger, I felt like I was getting home from work, I was dealing with my family, getting to bed, getting up the next day, and my life kind of rotated around that. And I loved every minute of that, so I'm not complaining. But I think it's so important now for your mental and physical health to have that balance, and it's certainly something I encourage the team to do. One of my teams just went on a leadership course, and one of his big targets from that was to be more selfish. And that sounds terrible, but actually meant to be more selfish with his time. So you do have to be strict with your diary. Sometimes you are going to have to say no, because it's important that you know, you're getting some exercise. I mean, if I'm having a bad day, I don't take a paracetamol, I'll go for a walk, I'll get some fresh air. You don't need fancy gym membership. So it is really difficult. But I do think this is another way that organisations are now seeing that this is a massive positive to support that work-life balance. But it is being strict with your diary. Sometimes you have to say no to people and giving yourself the time selfishly as well as with the family.
Yeah, I mean, in our program, Alison, there are 27 modules in the World Class Manager program. that we focus on everything from sort of, great one-to-ones to, having improved meetings. Module number 4, which is called optimizing time, is by far the most, in a way, commented on, and I would argue probably the most valued part of the program. And the reason why is because we focus on how to try and get some of your time back. Of course, you can't get time back, but it's more about looking at how you optimize and utilize your time. And you sort of look at the examples, love him or loathe him. When you look at someone like an Elon Musk, he's got the same 24 hours everyone else does, but it seems to achieve these ridiculous feats in the same amount of time everyone else has. And of course, it's not the time, it's more the utilization of it. There was an interesting interview. It was a couple of years ago. He was interviewed on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe Rogan was asking him, how do you do it? Like, how do you run all of these companies? I think he's got like 12 children or something. He's been active. as well as all that entails, how do you manage all of that and be the CEO of these companies? And one of the answers certainly that I took away from his response was it was more about how he kept empowering and building that next layer. So he was continually offloading stuff, and in a way, it reminds me of the management culture that I see at Bidvest or Bidcorp, because what I've sort of interacted with over the years in terms of the decentralized approach, it was very much you and Andrew and other leaders, pushing decision making into the depots that are able to own stuff, whereas a lot of organizations try and hold and make decisions on everything in the center or the corporate. And I think it's an interesting analogy for it as an individual. How do you try and let go of stuff so that you can free up the time to focus on other value-adding things?
And that's definitely a massive part of it. But you still have to be strict with yourself, because sometimes I'll get up early thinking, right, I'll go to the gym, I've got time, and I think, well, I'll just start doing work earlier. And you've got to have that discipline to commit to doing the other stuff as well. Set yourself those personal goals. Mine a few years ago were, right, I'm going to learn to play golf, I'm going to learn Spanish, I'm going to do this. Have your personal goals as well as your kind of career goals.
So how is your Spanish?
Spanish is terrible. Golf isn't much better, but I do try.
So can I ask you a final question in terms of the, just conscious that we've got a lot of people that are either at some stage of their journey with ACCA, as you've been through, is there anything now that you think, having built the career that you've built, if you would just qualify today, that's it, you're done. Is there any way that you would have managed your time differently or spent your early part of your career focusing your effort and your thoughts in a way to build the career that you want?
I think sometimes should have stayed in practice for longer, should have taken a slightly different path to where I've got to. So I think if you are in either practice or industry, just think very carefully before you make a move. Because I think that's, once you've made the switch, it's quite difficult. It's not impossible to go back. And I think, with accountancy firms now, there are a lot of different routes in. I think if you're going to be in industry, make sure you find a business that you're passionate about. As I said, a number of jobs over, 3 or 4 jobs over a 7-year period, I just wasn't finding the right fit. I wasn't finding the right business for me. So think very carefully about your path in terms of practice versus industry. And then once you've made that decision, make sure you find a business that's aligned to your values and aligned to what you're passionate about. And life is a lot easier then.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think the challenge is as you sort of go through your career, you start to become much more aware of perhaps what those values might be. For someone starting out on their career journey, I think if I was to go back to my first ever sort of interview, I was just over the moon to get a job. And then the other stuff starts to come in after that. So I think what helped me early on was having a really good manager stroke mentor early on in my career. I was very fortunate to have a guy who, maybe he's even on the line now, but he seems to sometimes also attend some of our sessions all these years after, like 30 years after. Amazing guy called Dr. James Riley. And one of the things that he was doing was sort of challenging me in these questions to ask me, where do you see yourself in the next few months? So really quite abrasive sometimes conversations about career development and future. So I think I didn't know though at that point of how valuable those conversations were. If I now look back, I think what I would have probably done as quickly as possible, starting in any job, find myself a really good mentor not necessarily that you want to have a formal mentor relationship, but somebody who can play that counter argument. And that's probably not your line manager, that's someone else in the organization. The other thing that I've realized over the years, and again, I wish I would have done this much sooner, is I realized that most senior people in an organization, when you ask them for some guidance or for some thoughts, they're usually quite generous, actually, but not many people ask. So, lots of leaders we come across say, I have an open door policy. And our next question is, well, how many people come through that door? And their answer is not many. Even though they've got the right intention, not many people come forward. So I think, if people came to you in the organization asking you for some guidance and your thoughts, I'm sure you'd be more than happy to give that, but not many people probably do.
No, and I think that's why, I do have an open door policy, but I think equally I walk around the office a lot and I speak to people and I find out what's going on, because they might not always come to you, and sometimes you have to go to them and ask them that question.
Yeah, very good. So we're going to leave it there because we're conscious of the time. We like to try and keep this nice and tight. Just a huge thank you, Alison. Thank you for being so generous with both with your time and also with your thoughts and your insights through your career as well. I mean, tremendously valuable. I've lived 100 lives already with my own career, but again, really useful hearing some of the things you shared today, as I'm sure I can speak on the behalf of many of the people who connected in of how valuable they will have found this as well. So a massive thank you for your time and your engagement. For those of you who are connected in, thank you so much for being here. We're going to share the next date, which is probably going to be early April, and we've got someone very special lined up also to carry on this theme of journey to CFO that we're going to cover in early April. So stay tuned and we'll share more details with you over the next few days. Alison, thank you again, and look forward to seeing you. Seeing you very soon. I'm sure people will connect to you on LinkedIn, so you may get lots of questions coming to you directly.
Questions, that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. Again, thank you, and see you again.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.